911 calls, they've got to end up somewhere, and today we're going to find out where. I'm Mark Fletcher, and I'm the Vice President of Public Safety Solutions here at 911 Inform. Joining me live but socially distanced right here in the podcast studio is my good friend Jeremy DeMar. He's got his MA, his CPE, his ENP, and his RPL, and he's the Executive Director at the Mountain Valley Emergency Communications Center right here in New Jersey. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, sir. Good to see you again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I found you on social media today, and you had a Jersey address all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of doing a little half and half right now. I've got a presence in Jersey until the family's fully relocated. Still making home for ourselves up in Massachusetts, but hopefully in the not-too-distant future, we'll be back in one place again.
So as far as New Jersey goes, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Is that a New York thing or a New Jersey thing?
I don't know. I'm going to say it's a New Jersey thing. So you're down as the executive director, so you got yourself a nice little PSAP gig in Jersey here.
I do. I love it. Feel very welcome down here. It's a very progressive, forward-thinking center with a great leadership team, and folks that I report to on the executive board are very supportive of our efforts. So very excited to kind of see where things go.
And you actually do multiple municipalities, right?
Yeah, we cover the borough of New Providence, the city of Summit, and the township of Millburn Short Hills. So 3 good-sized areas down there, and really good, committed public safety partners that are willing to work with us in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, 3 very affluent communities, too. That's got a lot of important people within your boundary.
Yeah.
So how do you keep everything running so smooth down there?
Well, I think, the first thing that I wanted to identify when I arrived at Mountain Valley was, what did I have from a leadership standpoint? And my deputy director, Keely Heyman, who was the interim director when my predecessor left, she did an outstanding job. She actually was onboarding herself in very much the same way I was when I came on. But of course, shortly after she kind of jumped into the thick of it is when COVID-19 started. So not only was she challenged in the fact that she was onboarding as an interim director in the absence of the actual director, but then she had a pandemic to contend with. So she did an outstanding job with that, and kudos to her for the work that she did. And kudos to all of our center personnel for working so closely with her to make sure that things went as smoothly as they did. But the first thing I did when I got down here is, and actually Deputy Director Heyman and I were talking extensively in the weeks leading up to my arrival so that I could kind of get an idea of where she was at. But she did an excellent job, and today continues to do an excellent job, and very fortunate to have her and the rest of the team there.
So you've been a study of this industry for years, and you've been building up to be this kind of guy in this kind of center, and you walk in the middle of COVID. How did that change your thinking?
Well, when I left Springfield, Massachusetts, which was my previous center, we had actually, the pandemic was really just starting to kind of get into the swing of things there, but we had developed policies and procedures there. So fortunately, going through that process and having those difficult conversations about how we were actually going to operate the center in this environment, I was able to take a lot of what we had done there and kind of build that into a script for how we were ultimately going to handle things down at Mountain Valley. But Keely, my deputy director, had already done an excellent job of kind of spacing folks out and making sure the staff were acclimated to this new environment that we all found ourselves in. So really, when I arrived, a lot of the legwork had already been done. I just kind of helped to build on that a little bit, and I think both Keely and I have seen a significant amount of progress in that. We've been very, very fortunate in that we haven't had any, and I'm knocking on wood as we're talking here, but we haven't.
Don't bang my desk.
It's a very nice desk.
Don't bang my desk.
No, we've been very fortunate. We've had, much like I'm sure a lot of the centers across the country, we've had folks that were exposed either indirectly or maybe directly, but not that close. But in any event, we've been very fortunate. Our folks have done very, very well when we have had those situations. The schedule's set up in such a way that we can space people out, and it really hasn't impacted our business model all that much.
Did you look at it having to potentially evacuate your center and building go kits? What did you do for that?
We do have a bit more of a plan for it now than we did when I first arrived. Keep in mind, of course, it was only, I think my first day on the job was April 20th. So again, actually, is today the 20th? I think we're 6 months today. So, we're still very much in adapt to each situation as it kind of evolves and make changes as you need to go. But I think as far as our center was concerned and how we were kind of dealing with those things, I relied a lot on our staff at the center, knowing what was required of the operation, knowing volume-wise when we needed more people versus less, and really Keely's expertise as it pertains to the location itself. That was the big challenge for me, coming from Massachusetts into New Jersey, where I wasn't in any way familiar with the area. The profession is very much the same as you go from place to place, but geographically speaking, things are very, very, very unique. So we rely a lot on those local folks to help us out with that.
You know, back in 9/11, I was working in the financial world, and really the best plan was to throw the book out, look at what you got, and figure out what you need to build. And that was a big wake-up, because it wasn't, I can have a book with a plan for everything.
Right.
You're never going to plan for that.
Yeah.
You need the situational awareness of what you got, what you need to deliver, and figure out how to make A go to B. Yep. And that's it. That's all you can really do. It's great to have some things available, and I know people like Chuck Spaulding, down in Florida, built some Go kits where he didn't have that. So again, it's a tool in the bag.
Yeah, and I think the folks in Alexandria, Virginia, did something similar too, where they actually had a true at-home model for their folks. And we've actually, Keely and I have looked at a couple of different options relative to that to kind of build out our infrastructure a little bit. There's a focus, obviously, on our part, especially after Tropical Storm Isa East, to try to build up some things internally and to make our systems a bit more resilient and more redundant. But I think we have a responsibility in our profession to do the same thing that Alexandria did in many ways, and the folks you mentioned down in Florida, to prepare ourselves for a model where ultimately our folks may not be able to be in the center as we know it today. So being able to have that non-brick and mortar model and give people that flexibility and that option, that's a good thing.
And it's not always a technology problem, right, Jeremy? I mean, it's, technology has solved this. We have millions of people working from home, doing everything from home. With you, it's more of an operational problem, because you've got critical sensitive information that you're delivering outside of your walled garden all of a sudden.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Well, and you're right. I mean, there's a lot of those things that I think the fact that we're in a traditional brick and mortar setting, I mean, we can control the exposure to that. We know we're able to regulate that a little bit better. We know who has access to it. And that is a big challenge. In fact, in talking with some of the folks from Arlington and some of the other folks that are working in the space, that's probably the single biggest challenge we have, is what is the integrity of that information going to be once it goes outside? So having trustworthy personnel, having reliable, responsible personnel that are willing to commit to what your organization needs to do, and be able to operate in an environment where they're not constantly being supervised every minute, those are a slew of different challenges. But I think as long as this pandemic progresses, and at this point, in mid-October, it doesn't show any signs of stopping at this point, we as leaders in this space need to continue to look at those options and evaluate those options.
So when you have the level of people that you need to do that job and do it remotely, these are seasoned people. These are not your typical rookie people. They know what they're doing, and they're not as easily supervised because they are smart.
Right.
But you've got to kind of over-supervise because you've got this new environment. How does that work out from a employer-employee perspective?
You're referring to if we had to go remote with that?
Yeah, if you went remote, all of a sudden, do you have people watching over people where you wouldn't normally have that in that enclosed environment?
I don't know that I have an answer to that question yet. I don't know that short of the few centers that you and I have talked about outside of what's going on right now, I don't know that anybody's really quite figured that out. Again, I think the trustworthy factor is a big piece of that. I think talking to your folks and making sure that they fully understand what your expectations are of them, that just because they're operating out of their house doesn't mean that, we're not answering the majority of the calls or 90% of the calls in 10 seconds or less, and we're not adhering to all these standards. I mean, those things are probably even more important when you're removed from the center, because when you're in a center environment, you're kind of, you're in the moment, you're in that mode, and you realize you've got these things to do. But we know how easy it is to get distracted when we're operating from home. We've seen that on a number of different occasions in a lot of different walks of life, not even a 911, but just in general with this new environment that we find ourselves in. So I think it's going to absolutely take, we need to have an investigative approach into how we're going to deal with that. But in the midst of trying to figure out what that remote picture or what that remote model looks like, we still have all the other challenges faced with operating in a pandemic in our traditional brick and mortar setting. So we're kind of being pulled in a number of different directions right now.
So I've been a work at home user since the last 20 years.
Old hat for you.
It's old hat for me, but and you're here at my house.
Yep.
In my
office.
Very
nice by the way.
But this is what I had to build.
Yep.
And this took 10, 15 years to fine-tune to what it is right now.
Right.
It's a separate building that used to be my garage.
Yep.
And it's now my office building. And this is where I go to work.
Right.
But I need that to maintain the separation.
Yeah.
I don't have the dog barking. I don't have kids coming in.
Yep.
I've got Fred the cat who wanders around.
Yeah, I saw Fred when I walked in.
Jumps on the keyboard once in a while. So, that's all the mistypes and misspells in my emails. Yeah. It's the cat walking on the keyboard. But this is what works for me.
Yeah. The opportunity to operate outside of a conventional environment in a remote setting, whether it be in a tactical dispatch setting or, simply doing things outside of the center. I don't know that we're that far off from being able to come up with a viable plan to work through that. I think the biggest challenge that we have is we don't do it often enough, so we're not trained in it well enough necessarily to just automatically flip that switch and make that jump. It needs to become as routine for us as maybe, training, the first center that I worked for up in Rochester, New York, periodically over the year we would take out the cards and we wouldn't shut CAD off, but we'd stop using CAD and we'd test with the cards because you want to test for that environment when those capabilities are still available to you if you need to switch back. But you want to test for it in an environment when you haven't lost everything. I would argue that you probably have to do the same thing in this remote setting because you don't use that equipment all the time. You don't pull those things out of the closet and start using them. You want your people not to be practicing with that when the actual event comes up. So incorporating that into your long-term training strategy with your training quality assurance coordinator, that's a plus, and making sure your people aren't seeing it for the first time when something bad happens.
Well, yeah, and it's easy to put somebody in a bus or a step van or a motor home or whatever, and you could build that environment. Why not build it? You got a nice little Tahoe. Yeah, I could set you up. Put a nice little deal in there.
It's a write-off.
It's a write-off. No, but I'm thinking, it was just something I always thought about that certainly not today, not even tomorrow or next week, but in the future, what a great opportunity as broadband has enabled that to happen.
Yeah. I think that, when we look at how technology is built out, and again, we comment, I commented earlier on the 5G piece, all your tier one providers out there are pushing 5G. And there's some folks out there that are probably reluctant to go with that for a variety of different reasons. But yeah, again, technology and time kind of are intermelded. They kind of improve, technology is expected to improve as time goes on, but we have to take advantage of some of these things that are coming out and not just dismiss them as something that we don't necessarily need. If we continue to stick with the model that we have stuck with for the last 25, 30 years, where is the growth in that? We really have to look at technology and try to embrace that to the best of our ability and use that to improve the services that we're delivering to the community and our public safety partners.
Let's talk about the people in the center a little bit. We're on the verge of opening Pandora's box and turning on a fire hose of data feed into them. Some of it's going to be relevant, some of it's not going to be relevant. What are your thoughts on that as far as not overloading but getting the info that's there to the people who need to see it and validating it? Because think about swatting today. Oh, I'm at this address. Okay, now I'm going to send you produced video that makes you think something is actually happening. Right? It's potential.
Yeah. And we think about, for the last, 52 years, we've been doing everything by phone. Everything that our profession has been one of audible only. Our folks have gotten very, very good at understanding what's going on behind the scenes simply by what they're hearing. And now we're suddenly going to plunge our folks into an environment where we're going to supplement that audible track with visual information, visual stimuli, potentially objectionable or graphic information. What is that going to do to the industry? That's a huge concern for anybody that's operating in a high-level leadership environment in the 911 community. And I think there's certainly a push in some cases by the public to be able to interact with connected public safety systems using a lot of the mediums that they're already accustomed to, whether it's, Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it happens to be. And rightly so. They should be able to send that information into us if it helps us and our public safety partners better do our job. I think one of our biggest crutches as a profession is a tendency to say, you know what, there's not really a need for it right now, or I haven't found a need for it, or there's not enough demand, or I haven't been asked for it. I'd argue that it makes more sense for you to start having the difficult conversations now with your public safety partners, with your people. Make sure that they understand what's going on here, and that you're not You're not coming in at the last minute when the public has finally demanded it of you and saying, okay, we're going to plunge you into this visual environment now. Do your best, and we hope everything works out. And we have a unique opportunity right now to do this, to bring our people up to speed when things are really starting to come to the forefront. Our industry partners and our vendors want to get these solutions out into the public arena, into the public safety sector, but are being met with a lot of, well, let's hold on and kind of see where things are at. It's already here. I mean, it's here now.
I think the industry is a little afraid to look at where similar things have been done successfully in the commercial space. I mean, I'm doing doctor's visits via video now, and shopping online and looking at 3D modeling of products, and we live in this immersive multimedia model. I'm not sure why public safety is so averse to even looking at that.
Yeah. Legacy practices for many are difficult to step away from, and I think especially when you're talking about a true game changer for our profession. I mean, the introduction of incident-related imagery is going to completely change the way in which our folks do things. And I think much like text to 911, I mean, when text to 911 was first introduced, and it's not even fully implemented nationwide right now, but when it was first introduced, I think there was this initial round of pushback from those providers that heard about it to say, we don't know how we're going to deal with that, or we don't know what's going to happen when those calls come in. And there was a reluctance to add that type of functionality into the center for fear of not being able to work with it. We know now from a text to 911 standpoint that the percentage of text to 911 calls that we receive relative to regular 911 calls is very, very small. So the impact is not that overwhelming. To some degree, I tend to think that that's what you're going to see as we start to phase in incident-related imagery, still images, pre-recorded media, video, those kind of things. I think you're going to see the same level thing because you're not going to have that visual piece coming in every single call. A lot of the calls we take at 911, as you're well aware, don't rise to that level of a true critical, life or death emergency. It's the parking complaint, the barking dog, those kind of things. So we're not going to be seeing imagery on every single call, but the option has to be there so that if something earth-shattering is happened, and our public safety partners need that data feed, and our folks need that to better understand what's going on, we need to be able to ingest that information, process it, and send it out appropriately.
No, I agree. It needs to be properly categorized and vetted coming in too, so you know what it is, where it is,
right,
how relevant it is. I just did a blog about utilizing video cameras on street corners that are in the commercial world. Well, something happens in that intersection, you've got 4 very unique views that could be crowdsourced for information if that was available. But again, understanding that it's there. There was a runaway driver in New York City a couple of years ago, and I remember they found video from a Walgreens.
Oh, yeah.
That was the best video of the entire incident.
Yep.
It took them 2 hours to find that. Imagine if they had a date. Wouldn't be hard to build a database if these cameras exist.
Yeah.
Heck, Ring wants to do that now. They're not interested in my camera for me, but they know
put you into a network. Yeah.
They know my neighbor is across the street, and that my outdoor driveway camera can see that address.
Yeah.
That's valuable information.
All connected and all readily accessible.
It's a little scary with Big Brother, but isn't it here already?
And they're already using that. I mean, you think about, you mentioned the incident in New York City. When we talk about all the different connected cameras, and I mean, I was watching a show, the name escapes me, but this is probably a year or so ago. I was watching the show and it was talking about your digital footprint and how you go from one place to another over the course of, your day, and how many different places you're tracked on camera and how many places you're seen or verified, or you're checking into different Wi-Fi networks. I don't think people even realize that to a certain degree. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me when I watched that. But yeah, all the different closed-circuit television systems and different connected cameras, I mean, they're already being used to investigate, criminal activity and things after the fact. So it's not a far reach to think that 911 and emergency communication centers will be part of that ingestion process, looking at that information and helping law enforcement figure things out.
My neighbor, a couple houses down, is an agent with the FBI, and he specializes in wireless stuff. And, he came up to me a couple of years ago, and he said, "Oh, you got home really late the other day." Yeah, I did. Why? How did you know that? And what he was doing was he was just catching, the IMEIs coming down the street with some equipment he had.
Yeah.
Who's around?
Yeah.
And he figured out pretty quickly which one was mine.
And he's the one telling you that. Think of all the people that are doing that aren't telling you that.
Well, that's it. Yeah. You know, I know him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Hey, Fletch, look what I found.
Yeah, check this out.
He shows me the cool stuff, but not the really cool stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say you might not get to see that.
I'm sure what I get to see is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
But so what do you think of New Jersey? You like it here? You going to stay?
I do.
Are you going to save us with next gen?
I would love to say that, but that's a pretty big pill to swallow right now. I don't think anybody's jumping into that. I love New Jersey. It was odd when my wife and I left upstate New York and moved to Massachusetts. You know, we knew being in the New England region, we were going to get to appreciate the foliage. But even being here in your newly constructed office, I mean, it was beautiful coming in here. The leaves are changing, and we're right in the middle of fall. So, fortunately, being here in New Jersey, it doesn't really feel like I'm that far away from home. Just looking outside and seeing what's going on. But no, I love the community. I love the folks I work with. Again, the leadership team is great. And, you know, before you get into a role like this, I did an extensive amount of research about the area. And it felt like the right thing to do. And it was a good time to come down and start things out. And I couldn't be happier.
When I was building, the double French doors were twice over budget. But I said, you know what? I'm going to be looking at that all day long.
Yep.
And I was
going to spend it once.
Yeah.
That
was a good choice, I got to say. Except the sun comes in and makes a beeline for my face at about 5 o'clock.
Put your blinders up there.
I got my blinders up there, though. But so have you figured out wonderful New Jersey oats yet?
You know, I've talked to a couple of the folks there. Again, it's 6 months today, so I'm very much, you know, and here, you know, COVID hasn't helped my case at all. If you'd have asked me if I thought I was going to be onboarding myself in a new role in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a tropical storm, you know, we had Tropical Storm East come through a few weeks back, but no, I would have said you were crazy. But it's been interesting. But my point was, I really haven't seen that many people since I've been down here. In fact, you and I chatting here today, this is probably, I can count on one hand the number of conversations I've had like this recently. Everything's been virtual. Everything's been Zoom or go-to meetings, those kind of things. So this is refreshing. We are 6 feet apart. I think we're about 6 feet apart.
Yeah,
so we're
close enough.
So nobody can yell at us. But no, it's a different environment, and I'm doing the best that I can to kind of acclimate myself to it. I think our folks in our center, our leadership team are doing an outstanding job with it. And it's every day presents new and unique challenges. And it's one of those constantly evolving things that you have to kind of monitor, keep track of whether or not, you know, neighboring states or neighboring areas have been hot listed or have they been cleared today, vice versa. So everybody's got a lot of stories about that, but it's a unique time, to say the least. Yeah.
So next gen is New Jersey's got some bids out right now to rebuild the core and deliver that to the 300 some odd PSAPs in New Jersey with legacy adapters, unless they're ready for next gen, which to me is the proper model. You put the adapter at the end, and you know what? When they change, you change the adapter or get rid of it, and you're done.
Yep.
So we may start to see that once the core is built and the ESINet's built. They're going to be extending. There's an RFI out right now to extend that to every PSAP.
Yeah, well, of course, coming from Massachusetts, where we had a fully deployed ESINet statewide and everybody was connected with call processing, I mean, it was terrific getting into Massachusetts and finding out that was the case. So if that is the next general step in the progression for New Jersey, that's awesome. That's a progressive and forward-thinking next step. And I think ultimately we know that nationally the existence of ESINets, the existence of connected architecture amongst all of our different centers is not as widespread or as mainstream as it needs to be. So I love hearing that. And again, only being here 6 months, I mean, I get a lot of my news firsthand every single day, just kind of bringing myself up to speed. But hearing that the state is actually looking at that, that's a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How about working with the other area directors? Have you found that?
I've met with actually recently, I think Gareth in Union County, so I've worked with him a little bit. I really haven't had the opportunity to meet with anybody else yet. Chris Caturo with OEM, I've worked with him a little bit, but really my efforts have been focused really on the center itself, trying to get everything built up there, making sure our people are in the right place. Again, I can only say this so many times. Being 6 months in, you go and think you're going to be doing one thing when you come on, and because you're in the midst of a pandemic and all these other little things, those take precedence right now. Hopefully when this madness is over with, whenever that is, or things have kind of simmered down a little bit, I'll be able to get out and start going to some collaborative sessions at the state level. I don't even have all the information on that as of yet, so I'm still trying to get acclimated with that. But the people that I have talked to thus far at Oates, and certainly Chris and Gareth, and certainly my deputy director, have all been very, very welcoming to me. And I'm very much looking forward to what the future holds and kind of where we're going with this.
I really like watching a really smart guy learn a new environment. It's kind of cool, and I think it's self-validating for you that all the work that you've put in is actually worth something, and you can apply all of your knowledge. So.
Well, I think the important thing for me is delegation becomes critical, because if I come in my role and think that I'm going to be everything to everybody, it's with all that I'm taking in for information and all the different things that I'm responsible for as part of my job anyways. If I didn't have the support of Keely and now our new training coordinator Sarah, who we just recently appointed, they're going to be a big part of our success and kind of where we go. But it's all about all of us working together. I'm not running that ship myself. The entire center has to all be kind of gelled. We have to be communicating with one another. And I think we're doing a real good job, at least I hope I'm doing a good job of conveying to my folks that not only are they a critical and important part of the team, but that communication doesn't reside within the senior leadership team alone. We're passing that off to everybody.
No, fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sitting down. It's been way too many years before.
It has.
Since we've done this. We got to do it more often.
Now that I know where you live.
Now that you know where I live, yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
I know where you live. Jeremy DeMar, he's got his master's, his CPE, his ENP, and his RPL, and probably could add a few more to that as well. And he's a good friend and somebody who's well-versed, a student of the industry at probably one of the best examples. So welcome to New Jersey.
Thank you, Fletch.
I feel a little bit safer that you're in the state, but way down there.
Way down, way down. Not too far, though. Way down.
Not a little bit down. All right, great. Thanks for sitting down.
Thanks, Fletch.
Well, there you have it. That wraps up our first episode of Next Gen 911 FutureMakers. It's a series where we highlight individuals who are making a difference for the future of Next Gen 911 and public safety. I'm your host, Mark Fletcher. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Fletch911. Be sure to check out my podcasts and blogs, and you can do that on the web at www.fletch.tv. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. Stay safe.